Outside of Time Episode 7. In the previous episode, Xu Qing stepped into a deadly confrontation as the Bloodshadow killers closed in. Despite being outmatched by a spellcaster at the 5th stage, he refused to back down. Fire Crow unleashed scorching flames that burned everything in their path, and for a moment, it seemed Xu Qing had been reduced to ashes. But just as his enemies turned away, he emerged from the blaze, blistered, bleeding, and utterly relentless. With a sudden burst of ferocity, he shattered Fire Crow's defenses and struck back with a dagger and an iron rod, leaving his foe wounded and furious. At the end of the previous episode, Xu Qing stood in the glow of the dying sun, battered but unyielding, his eyes cold and fixed on the kill. What will happen next? Stay tuned. And the story continues. Under the twilight, the youth's figure caused Fire Crow's heart to be shaken. He was a well-experienced scavenger. If it was a newbie in his shoes, they'd definitely be shocked despite the fact that their cultivation level clearly surpassed the other party. Fire Crow, despite his years of scavenging and countless battles, felt a ripple of unease sweep through him as he faced Xu Qing. There was something different about this youth, something that set him apart from ordinary opponents. His injuries, visible on his ear and chest, did not seem to hinder him at all. Yet, the intensity in his eyes, the determination in his stance, made it clear that he was not someone to underestimate. "Bastard, I will pluck out your teeth one by one as my spoils of war," Fire Crow roared, his voice low and full of fury. With that, he tore off his clothes, revealing a skinny but wiry upper body, a body honed by survival and battle. Ignoring the pain from his injuries, he formed a set of complex mudras with his hands. His face flushed red as the air around him shimmered and a massive fireball suddenly appeared in his palms, even larger than those he had conjured before. Xu Qing's eyes narrowed. He knew that he could not afford to wait. With a sudden burst of speed, he moved, anticipating the oncoming attack. "Scatter!" Fire Crow shouted, splitting the enormous fireball into 5 smaller, blistering spheres that hurtled toward Xu Qing with deadly precision. The flames erupted upon impact with the ground, scorching the jungle and sending thick smoke curling into the twilight sky. Yet Xu Qing was undeterred. He dashed through the burning terrain, weaving with agility and launching 2 consecutive punches that shattered the protective barriers in his path. Each strike, though it pushed him back and left him singed by the heat, was precise and forceful, revealing a level of skill that could not be ignored. The battle escalated rapidly. Xu Qing, despite being at a lower cultivation level than Fire Crow, seemed almost unyielding. The spirit energy barrier hindered his close-range attacks, and the relentless fireballs were a constant threat. Yet his recovery was astonishing. Cuts and burns healed quickly, leaving him able to maintain his speed and strength. The prolonged pain might have broken a lesser fighter, but Xu Qing, hardened by a life of hardship in the slums, tolerated it with remarkable resilience. Most importantly, the spirit energy filled with anomalous substances that Fire Crow relied on did not affect Xu Qing at all. For Fire Crow, the opposite was true. The injuries on his ear and chest worsened, but the real problem was his spirit energy. Even at the 5th level of Qi condensation, he could not sustain the high consumption required to maintain his attacks. Desperately, he absorbed spirit energy to replenish his reserves. But the intense battle left him no time to rest. The anomalous substances in his body surged uncontrollably, making him increasingly anxious. At first, Fire Crow's fury had been intense, but as the battle dragged on, it began to shift. Nervousness crept in, turning to outright anxiety as he realized something was off. Xu Qing's endurance and speed were unlike anything he had encountered. Anyone else, even at his level, would have been incinerated by the fireballs long ago. Yet Xu Qing pressed on, unfazed by injuries or extreme heat. The sheer unnaturalness of the youth's resilience unsettled him deeply. In the distance, the Bloodshadow team captain, who was engaged in combat against Captain Lei, could not help but notice the intense clash. His instincts screamed at him to intervene, but Captain Lei's relentless assault prevented him from moving. All he could do was watch with rising anxiety as the young Xu Qing continued his daring strategy. Captain Lei, observing quietly, understood something crucial. Xu Qing intended to draw out the fight, to push Fire Crow to the brink of mutation. He did not know how Xu Qing could endure such pain or maintain his strength. But he respected the youth's secret. Everyone had their own hidden abilities, and probing them was futile. The fight continued, ferocity escalating with every exchange. Fire Crow attempted to summon 3 additional fireballs, but the effort only highlighted his disadvantage. His anxiety transformed into desperation. Then, in a fit of recklessness, he slammed his right hand against his chest, spitting a mouthful of blood. Swiftly, he gathered some droplets with his left hand as he chanted an incantation. The blood darkened to black almost instantly, a chilling manifestation of his escalating power. Xu Qing's eyes narrowed with a sense of imminent danger. He surged forward, intent on disrupting the spell. But Fire Crow moved with unnatural speed. His head jerked up, his expression twisted with cruelty as he thrust his right hand forward. The blackened blood coalesced into a sphere, the size of a human head, and hurtled toward Xu Qing with tremendous force. Die! Fire Crow bellowed, a low, sinister roar that echoed across the charred jungle. Xu Qing's killing intent intensified. The moment had arrived, precisely as Captain Lei had predicted. He had prepared not just to survive Fire Crow's mutation, but to strike decisively. He moved with lightning speed, not directly toward his opponent, but diverting toward the remains of Barbaric Ghost, where a collection of weapons lay among the corpses scorched by previous attacks. He seized the opportunity presented by Fire Crow's weakened state. Though he had set the stage for his enemy's mutation, Xu Qing had never abandoned the goal of victory. Every step, every calculated maneuver brought him closer to turning the tide. He had endured, adapted, and now struck with precision, his resolve unwavering even amidst chaos and danger. Barbaric Ghost's corpse was covered in burn marks from Fire Crow's large area of effect fireball attacks. But in this place, other than the corpses, there were also Barbaric Ghost's weapons. There was a mace and 2 pieces of broken finesteel shield. However, Xu Qing's target was the bigger piece of the broken shield. Xu Qing's eyes immediately locked onto the larger shard of the broken finesteel shield. His small and wiry frame moved with astonishing speed as he lunged forward, gripping the heavy shield tightly. Despite the shield's weight, he positioned it in front of him, creating a protective barrier over his body. With a determined roar, he charged straight toward Fire Crow, who was looming behind the ominous black blood sphere he had conjured. Moments later, the black blood sphere collided with the finesteel shield with an explosive force that shook the ground. Black droplets sprayed outward in every direction, like jets of liquid shadow. Yet the shield bore the brunt of the attack. It fragmented under the immense pressure, but still absorbed most of the blow, sparing Xu Qing from fatal injury. Some splashes of black blood hit him, burning against his skin, but he pressed forward relentlessly, teeth clenched, showing no hesitation. His focus was singular: close the distance to Fire Crow, no matter the danger. Fire Crow's expression was one of mockery. Confident in his next move, he raised both hands in a series of intricate mudras, and the scattered black blood around Xu Qing began to rise from the ground. Swirling upward as if responding to his will, the blood coalesced, forming countless jagged blood arrows, pointed and sharp, ready to impale Xu Qing. With this, the battlefield seemed to shrink around him. There was no space to dodge. Yet Xu Qing did not flinch or divert. He had a plan, and it demanded absolute courage and precision. As he closed in, Xu Qing's left hand formed a fist instinctively, but it was his right hand that delivered the first blow. His punch struck the spirit energy barrier enveloping Fire Crow, sending cracks radiating across the surface. Blood stained Xu Qing's right fist as he tore through the outer layer of the barrier, fragments of flesh and scales sticking to him in the process. Before Fire Crow could fully react, Xu Qing's eyes glowed red with intensity, and he struck a second blow, breaking the barrier into shattered pieces. The impact waves erupted outward, pushing Xu Qing back, yet he braced himself, refusing to yield as he had in previous confrontations. The mockery on Fire Crow's face faltered as he realized Xu Qing's resolve was unmatched. Amid the crashing waves of energy, Xu Qing drew on some mysterious, seemingly limitless inner strength. He pressed forward, his body surging with power, and reached for the injured, bloodied part of Firecrow's chest, where an iron stick had previously pierced. He tore at the wound, but his grab could not deliver a killing blow. He had only enough force to exploit the vulnerability and then retreat before being overwhelmed. Firecrow's composure wavered as he stumbled backward. He wanted to strike, to unleash another spell of black blood, but the moment his eyes fell upon the damage, his mind froze. Within the open wound, shards of broken fangs and bits of mushy, scaled flesh had mingled with his own blood. Venomous substances seeped from the injury, corroding the surrounding tissue rapidly, and the pain surged through him like wildfire. He let out a guttural cry of agony, terror written across his face as he staggered and tried desperately to remove the venomous blood. But the more he struggled, the faster his stamina and vitality drained away. From a distance, Xu Qing crouched, steady and calm despite the chaos. In his right palm, he held broken pieces of flesh and crushed fangs, shaped like a snake's head, the same venomous design he had previously used against corpses. His left hand trembled slightly as it opened, revealing the tail of a ghost-faced scorpion embedded deep in his palm. The tail infused him with an unnatural strength, while the venom from the snake head added a lethal potency to his attacks. Xu Qing was fully prepared, and Firecrow's panic only heightened his advantage. Firecrow could barely speak, his voice trembling as fear overtook him. His mind raced, yet paralysis gripped him as he realized the inevitability of his fate. Xu Qing's right hand, tainted by the snake venom, did not corrode, confirming his calculated preparation. This was the killing blow he had orchestrated, waiting for the precise moment when Firecrow's defenses and mental state would collapse. Xu Qing rose and sprinted toward his adversary, his every movement exuding deadly precision. Firecrow's eyes, filled with horror and disbelief, followed him. He wailed and shrieked, pleading for help, calling for his captain. The Bloodshadow team captain, locked in combat with Captain Lei, saw the tragic scene unfold and wanted to intervene. But Captain Lei's attacks prevented him from moving. All he could do was witness Xu Qing closing in with terrifying speed. As Xu Qing approached, the accumulated anomalous substances within Firecrow, previously suppressed by his will, surged uncontrollably. His body stiffened, and a violent explosion of energy consumed him. In a horrifying instant, Firecrow's form erupted into a mist of blood, leaving no trace of his once menacing figure. Some mutants left behind corpses, twisted and greenish-black, but others, like Firecrow, were obliterated entirely. Xu Qing stopped at the site where the blood mist had settled. His eyes cold and piercing, he turned slowly, his gaze fixing on the Bloodshadow team captain. The sun was dipping, yet the dusk was strange, suffused with an unnatural red glow. Xu Qing's wounded figure reflected the crimson light, his presence exuding a crushing pressure that sent tremors through the mind of even a superior cultivator. Firecrow's tragic demise left the Bloodshadow team captain shaken to his core. He had fought long against Captain Lei without success, and now faced the incomprehensible power and precision of Xu Qing. Unease and fear gripped him, and when Xu Qing's gaze landed upon him, he instinctively reacted, blasting back Captain Lei with a punch before retreating hastily. At this moment, his gaze flickered, and the instant when Xu Qing glanced over, he blasted back Captain Lei with a punch and rapidly retreated with no hesitation. He didn't wish to continue with the fight any longer. Captain Lei wanted to pursue, but when he raised his head and saw that smear of strange redness in the sky, his expression suddenly changed. Immediately, his emotions began to fluctuate wildly. He coughed out fresh blood, and his body started turning a sickly greenish-black. It was clear that he was on the verge of collapse, pushed to the edge by some unseen, oppressive force. Xu Qing moved swiftly, his eyes sharp and alert, and hurried to support the struggling Captain Lei. He gently helped the exhausted warrior sit under a large, sturdy tree, taking a moment to catch his breath. From that vantage point, Xu Qing gazed into the dense, distant jungle where the Bloodshadow team captain had sped away. His eyes flickered with cold, precise murderous intent. Even at a glance, his focus radiated a lethal calm. "Do not pursue him," Xu Qing said firmly, his voice low but unyielding. With the Blood Shadow team destroyed, he is powerless. Besides, this redness in the sky? I think I have seen it before. Captain Lei, still panting heavily, clutched onto Xu Qing instinctively as he followed the young man's gaze toward the mysterious phenomenon. The vast blue dome of the sky was partially covered in a strange, blood-tinged hue, a lurking peril. Xu Qing thought. He had no tolerance for unseen threats. And within the confines of this forbidden jungle, he was resolute. Just as he had led Fire Crow to his death, he intended to do the same with the Blood Shadow captain. Yet the deep, inexplicable red above reminded him of caution, instinctively drawing his eyes upward. At that moment, a soft, ethereal melody drifted through the jungle, delicate but haunting. The usual cacophony of mutated beast roars vanished entirely, leaving a silence that made the song stand out even more vividly. It was as if the entire forest were holding its breath. The voice, gentle yet imbued with profound sorrow, sounded like a woman mourning her husband's departure. The sound carried with the wind, faintly resonating through the air, as tendrils of red mist began to rise from the ground near the fleeing Blood Shadow captain. The mist crept outward, filling the space like a living entity. Xu Qing's body trembled involuntarily. Even Captain Lei, who had fought countless battles and faced unimaginable dangers, shuddered in place, their eyes both locked on the source of the sound. But while Xu Qing's vigilance remained razor-sharp, Captain Lei appeared lost in a trance. The singing intensified, and when the sound reached Xu Qing's ears, a chilling cold seeped through his entire body, like the icy blood rain that had fallen in the ruined city from before. Though he had reached the third level of body refinement, the sensation was overwhelming. His teeth began to chatter uncontrollably, and his muscles stiffened, making movement nearly impossible. A storm of memories and warnings raced through his mind, recalling what Cross had said about the Forbidden Zone's taboos when they first entered. In the distance, the Blood Shadow captain had stopped as well, frozen as if some invisible force had sapped all strength from his body. Xu Qing watched as wisps of white mist flowed from the captain's 7 apertures, blending into the spreading blood fog in the air. Within moments, the captain's form withered, decayed, and crumbled into a dried corpse, leaving only dust to scatter in the air. The crimson fog continued to drift and spread, moving closer toward Xu Qing and Captain Lei. Xu Qing's body shook violently as the fog approached. He finally glimpsed the source of the captain's demise, a pair of bright red, tattered women's boots, moving forward on their own across the forest floor. There was no visible figure above them, only the haunting song carrying with them. The boots moved steadily, step by step, as if an invisible woman wore them, singing sorrowfully as she walked closer. The voice became clearer, sorrowful and filled with unspoken bitterness. Xu Qing's pupils constricted in shock, and although his mind screamed for him to move, his body refused. His entire being was frozen by the bone-deep cold, his teeth rattling as he could only watch the boots approach. They came closer and closer until they were mere half a jong from him. The air thick with the presence of death, the threat of annihilation pressed down on every fiber of Xu Qing's being. Just as the boots were about to take another step, a trembling voice came from beside him. It was Captain Lei, hoarse and quivering, yet full of recognition. "Red Peach, is that you?" The singing halted abruptly. The lifted boot froze mid-step, then changed direction as if the invisible woman had turned to acknowledge Captain Lei. The old warrior's body trembled, his breathing ragged, yet the exhaustion in him was momentarily overcome by a glimmer of life and hope. Tears streamed down his face as he stared, unblinking, at the space above the boots. It was as if someone irreplaceably important to him, separated by the realms of yin and yang, stood there. Captain Lei reached out, attempting to grasp her presence. The boots squatted slightly, leaning forward as if to meet his hand, though nothing tangible could be touched. His grasp swept through empty air, yet the act released his pent-up emotions, tears cascading freely as his murmurs of longing filled the void. After a long, silent moment, the invisible presence sighed softly. The boots slowly rose and retreated 3 jongs, adjusting their direction to bypass Xu Qing, moving farther into the distance as the red mist followed. The haunting melody continued, carrying the bitter sorrow of separation. You asked when I shall return. I have no idea, asking about a return date which seems uncertain. The fog and its song drifted away, the voice growing fainter, carrying melancholy and anguish as it receded into the distance. Only when the singing weakened entirely did the blood-colored fog vanish completely. Xu Qing's body regained mobility, his legs trembling, heart racing, and chest heaving. He glanced at Captain Lei, who sat beneath the tree, eyes still wide and dazed, tears trailing silently down his weathered face. Xu Qing remained silent. Words failed him in the face of what they had witnessed. Finally, after a long pause, Captain Lei muttered softly, "Do you find it strange?" Xu Qing nodded quietly, acknowledging the truth in the old warrior's words. Captain Lei continued, voice low and filled with emotion. "Before, Cross told you I am one of the few who have heard that singing voice. Most who hear it die, but a few survive, and they are gifted. They can see the person they miss most in their lives. I waited decades at the campsite, hair turning white, until I finally saw her." Captain Lei's body seemed to age as he spoke, wrinkles deepening, a fragile aura enveloping him. His words carried a bitter warning. If you also have someone separated by yin and yang, someone you long to see, do not linger here. Even if you see them, it is still ultimately futile. Xu Qing said nothing. His gaze rose to where the voice had disappeared, memories stirring deep within him. Xu Qing was silent. He lifted his head toward the place where the voice disappeared to. In the depths of his eyes, recollection of his memory gradually emerged. There was someone he wanted to see too. Someone he really, really missed. Perhaps it was because of the singing voice. But within this jungle of the Forbidden Zone, the howling of the mutated beasts still didn't appear. It was as though the source of the singing voice was this Forbidden Zone's ruler. After its presence manifested, the entire jungle seemed to fall silent. Even the most ferocious mutated beasts, normally howling and shrieking with feral intensity, had been subdued, as if obeying an invisible command. Captain Lei remained seated quietly under the cover of the tree, his gaze locked on the faraway darkness where nothing appeared to move. Yet the weight of danger hung in the air like a dense fog. Xu Qing's expression was a mixture of contemplation and solemnity. He scanned his surroundings carefully, eventually resting his eyes on the scattered remnants of Barbaric Ghost's equipment, a mace and the shattered fragments of a finesteel shield. Barbaric Ghost's body, like all the other scavengers who had perished in this cursed place, had turned to dust once the singing fog had receded. It was as if they had never existed, leaving only the trace of their deeds and the faint memory of their presence. Xu Qing's mind wandered to thoughts of impermanence. He considered the reality of scavengers. Most of them had no family. Few who would remember or mourn them. And even if someone cared, in the march of centuries, all would be forgotten. No one would remember the sacrifices, the battles, or even the existence of these lost souls. A memory of his teacher in the slums surfaced. The teacher had once told a group of children words that had seemed mysterious at the time. To have someone you cannot forget is a kind of suffering. But to be remembered by someone else is a type of blessing. Xu Qing had not understood it back then. Yet now, watching Captain Lei sit silently beneath the shadow of the forest, he felt a subtle understanding of that sentiment. He did not disturb the older man, instead moving quietly toward the place where Barbaric Ghost's body had been. In his hand, he carried a dagger. Without hesitation, he began digging into the earth. Though his connection to Barbaric Ghost had been brief, and their acquaintance measured in only days, the other scavenger had imparted knowledge crucial to survival within this jungle and had fought alongside him against lethal threats. Barbaric Ghost's mace and shield fragments had been instrumental in fending off the Black Blood, allowing Xu Qing to maintain his offensive. With solemn determination, Xu Qing dug a deep pit in the soil. Sweat dampened his forehead as he carefully placed the mace and shield fragments into the freshly carved grave, ensuring they were laid to rest with intention and care. During this ritual, he did not notice Captain Lei observing him from a short distance away. The older man's face revealed a quiet astonishment, reminiscent of the moment he had first seen Xu Qing in the ruins of the city. Finally, Captain Lei spoke, his voice weak but filled with a measured authority. Scavengers do not need tombstones. Ashes to ashes, dust to dust. This is the way of our life. While living, we struggle against the world. Once we die, there is no need for sacrifice. Peace is enough. The words, though simple, resonated deeply. Captain Lei's breathing grew increasingly shallow. The combined effects of accumulated anomalous substances, grievous injuries, and mental fatigue overwhelming him. Gradually, his vision blurred, the world around him fading as unconsciousness claimed him. Xu Qing reacted swiftly. From his pocket, he retrieved some 7-leaf grass and placed it carefully into Captain Lei's mouth. Though he could not be certain of its efficacy, he knew it was an essential component in making white pills and might mitigate the effects of the anomalous substances. Once satisfied, Xu Qing hoisted Captain Lei onto his back. Securing him tightly with strips of cloth, he inhaled deeply, preparing to navigate the perilous jungle under the cover of night. Moving with speed and precision, Xu Qing weaved through the dense foliage. His senses remained acutely aware of any potential threats. When he passed the location where the Bloodshadow captain had been reduced to dust, Xu Qing noticed a leather bag lying partially hidden. He picked it up and inspected its contents. Finding no medicinal pills, only various miscellaneous items. Nevertheless, he secured the bag and continued, pressing onward through the night. Time passed. Nearly an hour later, Captain Lei stirred, his consciousness returning gradually. He could faintly sense being carried, and as his eyes opened, he caught a glimpse of Xu Qing's focused face in the dim light. The sight was quiet, yet it carried reassurance. Xu Qing, sensing the awakening of the older man, spoke softly. "Are you feeling better? There are a few hours left, so you can continue resting. We should be able to exit the Forbidden Zone before daybreak." Captain Lei remained silent, his frail body revealing the depth of his age and exhaustion. He attempted to lift his head to gauge the darkness of the sky but found his vision wavering. Just as he felt the pull of unconsciousness again, he whispered a question. "Kid, do you know why I proposed to take you away twice in that ruined city?" Xu Qing shook his head in response. Maintaining steady movement, Captain Lei continued, voice weak but deliberate. "Do you remember the scene when we first met?" "I remember," Xu Qing replied as he leapt over a massive fallen tree. Instantly, a mutated lizard darted toward them from the underbrush. Xu Qing's hand shot out, grabbing it mid-leap and tossing it onto the ground ahead. The ground's vines reacted immediately, wrapping around the struggling creature, puncturing its leathery armor and devouring its flesh. With careful timing, Xu Qing leapt forward, evading harm while maintaining speed. Behind him, Captain Lei's voice mumbled faintly, almost swallowed by the jungle's night. "I saw the silhouette of you cremating the corpses. The fire illuminated you as you stood there. It was as if you fused with the fire. I felt a trace of warmth in this cruel world." The words struck Xu Qing. He paused for a moment, absorbing their weight, before continuing onward once Captain Lei succumbed to unconsciousness again. 2 hours passed swiftly as Xu Qing navigated past countless obstacles, ever closer to the jungle's boundary. Darkness enveloped the forest, and the cold of the Forbidden Zone pressed against him like a living entity. The faster he moved, the more his body generated heat, instinctively resisting the oppressive chill. Yet, as he pressed forward, the cold became ever more severe, seeping into his bones, biting at every exposed surface. The night dragged on, and with the passage of the time it took for an incense stick to burn completely. Xu Qing halted abruptly. His expression had grown somber, the darkness ahead hiding unknown threats and uncertainties. However, as he moved forward, the cold became increasingly intense. After the amount of time it took for an incense stick to burn out, Xu Qing stopped abruptly. His expression was somber as he looked ahead. In front of him, fog emerged from the jungle. The fog was extremely thick and had spread out into the distance. However, it wasn't the same as the blood fog Xu Qing had seen before. The sense of oppression didn't seem too intense. Xu Qing observed the dense mist creeping through the darkness. It stretched as far as the eye could perceive, its thick, swirling presence making everything within its range appear blurry and indistinct. The darkness of the night only amplified its obscuring effect. Xu Qing instinctively wanted to avoid it. Yet no matter how far he ran, the fog seemed to move with him, approaching steadily from every direction. He recognized it immediately. Cross and Luan Tooth had spoken of this phenomenon when they first entered the Forbidden Zone. It was one of the myriad dangers lurking in this cursed land, the labyrinth fog. Those trapped within it would lose their sense of direction, wandering endlessly until they succumbed to disorientation, exhaustion, or even the fatal effects of anomalous substances. Xu Qing evaluated the situation. He believed he could endure the fog, that his body could resist the surge of anomalous substances long enough for it to dissipate. But Captain Lei, weak and already on the verge of collapse, could not. If the fog trapped him, death would come swiftly. There was no alternative. Xu Qing had to find a path around it, attempting to circle beyond its reach. Despite his speed and careful maneuvering, the fog soon enveloped them completely. It surrounded them on all sides, cutting off any escape. There was nowhere to hide, nowhere to flee. Yet after a time, the fog thinned momentarily, revealing Xu Qing in the center. Bewildered but aware, he glanced down at the ground beneath his feet. Even in the absence of shadows, Xu Qing sensed movement. The fog seemed to rush beneath him, forming a vortex that devoured its surroundings. Though the devouring motion was slow, it ultimately halted, leaving the space around him briefly clear. Yet as quickly as it had receded, the fog returned, threatening to obscure him once more. Then, unexpectedly, a strange force poured into him, converging at his eyes. Though the fog remained thick and pervasive, his perception allowed him to see through it. It was not normal sight, it was an awareness that transcended ordinary vision. The world around him remained partially obscured, yet he could now navigate with clarity, the fog no longer threatening to trap him. Xu Qing's breath quickened. He muttered under his breath, "You, what exactly are you?" before lifting his head and moving forward with renewed urgency. Within the labyrinth fog, he became a ghost-like presence, moving silently and swiftly. Soon, Xu Qing noticed signs of life. Two scavengers appeared ahead, holding each other's hands. They were clearly disoriented, moving cautiously as if blind, probing the fog with each step. Their movements were erratic, and despite their effort to advance, it was evident they were walking in circles. Sweat drenched their foreheads, and their heavy, anxious breaths revealed a growing sense of despair. Xu Qing studied them for a moment before turning to move on. Normally, he might not have intervened. He had seen too often how helping others in this cruel world invited backlash or worse. But the urgency of Captain Lei's condition weighed on him, compelling him to act. Even as Xu Qing attempted to retreat, his footsteps carried sound, detected by the disoriented scavengers. One shouted in a feeble attempt to intimidate what they believed to be a beast. The other cried out for help, brandishing their leather bag containing white pills and spirit coins as a promise of repayment. Xu Qing paused, considering the situation. Captain Lei's frailty demanded that he act carefully. After a moment, he rummaged through the scavenger's bag and found a candle, lighting it to cast a faint glow through the oppressive fog. The dim illumination provided just enough clarity to guide them. He instructed them calmly but firmly. Go right and walk straight for 7 steps. Then 10 steps to the left. The scavengers trembled, obeying his directions with desperation. Each instruction allowed them to avoid danger, carefully circumventing the traps hidden within the fog. Gradually, the path in front of them thinned, revealing the weak light of the candle. It was as though sight had returned to blind eyes. They fell to their knees in relief and exhaustion, overwhelmed by the sudden perception of safety. Xu Qing, remaining hidden in the shadows, observed their reaction with a stoic expression. He demanded, "Give me white pills." Without hesitation, one scavenger surrendered his leather bag, understanding that repayment was immediate. The other hesitated, his excitement dampened by the awareness of Xu Qing's vigilant presence. Xu Qing's gaze met his, silent but commanding. With a subtle wave of his right hand, the candle's flame was extinguished, plunging the scene into pitch-black darkness. The labyrinth fog returned, enveloping everything. Panic erupted in the scavengers. One fell over a tree root in a flurry of anxious movement, his pleas for mercy echoing futilely into the night. Xu Qing ignored the man's cries, focusing instead on the scavenger who had complied. He whispered calmly, "Follow the sound of my footsteps." The scavenger obeyed immediately, guided solely by sound, trust, and desperation. Behind them, the other scavenger's wailing transformed into frantic curses. His despair unmistakable, each cry reinforced the gratitude of the one following Xu Qing. The footsteps ahead became a lifeline, and with every step, the survivor's awe for Xu Qing deepened. It was especially so after he heard the anxious wailing behind him turning quickly into a frenzied cursing after failing to call for help. The despair in that tone made his heart tremble. Toward the owner of the footsteps ahead of him, he held them in greater awe. In this episode, we saw Xu Qing face overwhelming challenges in the Forbidden Zone. Demonstrating his courage, intelligence, and resilience, he confronted deadly opponents like Firecrow, overcoming lethal attacks with both strategy and sheer determination. Along the way, he showed compassion and respect, taking the time to properly honor fallen allies like Barbaric Ghost, while also ensuring the survival of Captain Lei, carrying him safely through dangerous terrains and navigating treacherous labyrinth fogs. The episode also revealed the mysterious and haunting presence within the jungle. From the red-booted apparition to the labyrinthine mist, adding layers of suspense and awe to Xu Qing's journey. What happens next? Stay tuned for the next episode of Outside of Time. If you enjoyed this episode or found it exciting, don't forget to like the video and subscribe to the channel to receive notifications about the latest episodes following Xu Qing's adventure. Thank you for watching, and we look forward to seeing you in the next videos.